Hey guys, welcome back. This is Library of Orthonc, LOTR TCG, back with another all-foil deck video for you here today. So today we are starting off our journey into the movie block. And some of you guys know this is my favorite format. This is where I have a full gauntlet of decks built. And what I'm doing for these videos, though, is actually featuring the exact lists, card for card, as they were played at the 2004 World Championships. So what we have here today is the World Champion Day 3 list from Emir Delic. This is the Elves for the Free People's side, combined with Gollum for the Shadow side. So that's the deck that we're featuring. From what I understand from the information I've looked at, he was playing Rohan on day 2. We'll look at that deck at another time, but today we're going to be looking at his day 3 deck, which was Elves for the Free Peoples and Ninja Gollum for the Shadow. So let's dive right into this. We're going to do a more in-depth deck tech, so this is going to be a longer video where I actually try to cover the card interactions, how it plays, those sorts of things. So we're going to start off with the Free People's side, and of course starting off with our starting fellowship, and this is just a fantastic starting fellowship. So you do start Frodo, Resolute, Hobbit, and again this is the one that has no ability, but it does have resistance 12, so that's just to be able to take more burdens should you need to. And you'll see we do actually combine it with the Binding Ring, which is the ring where you can take a burden to play a ring, take 2 burdens to play a ring from your draw deck. So that does synergize very nicely, because you'll see there's a number of rings in here. So this is actually a very nice card for this deck in particular. And then the rest of the starting fellowship, of course, we have Legolas Greenleaf. You know, without a question, one of the fantastic cards in the movie block and one of my favorite LOTR TCG foils of all time. It's just very gorgeous card. So Legolas, you all know what he does. He exerts to wound a minion in the archery as an archery action. And then Glorfindel is rounding out our fellowship, actually, because he's just the next character in the fellowship. And he is just statistically very good. So he doesn't actually cost 4 in the starting fellowship because his Twilight cost is -2. So he just counts as 2. So we've got 0, 2, 2. So we're up to our 4. But you'll see then that the last card is lover or hater, Galadriel, Lady Redeemed. A lot of people have strong feelings about this card in the movie block format. It is certainly very strong. There is some tech that can be employed against her, but a lot of people just don't like how she just dismantles the support area of the Shadow side. And, you know, certainly it definitely does. And obviously just way undercosted at 0 for the starting fellowship, because she's -3 in the starting fellowship. So this, I don't know why it should have maybe been -1 or -2 or something of that nature, but to just let you play this for free, and then with her ability is just absurd. So her ability, if anyone doesn't know, is she can discard an Elven event just from hand to discard a shadow condition or possession. So you just are cycling and pitching cards out of your hand and just cleaning off the table of cards that your opponent paid to play. So it's a very unfair trade. So there is our starting fellowship. So yeah, one of the best starting fellowships certainly you'll see in the movie block right there. Then of course this is a elf heavy deck, so let's move on to our companions, our other elves. We have Gil-Galad, the Elven High King. This guy is just an absolute beast. You know, these guys that cost 5, again, statistically very strong. You must spot 2 elf companions to play him, and his ability is regroup, exert Gil-Galad to wound each wounded minion. So the trick there, of course, is to get a wound on every single minion, and then you can exert him to wound them all. And, you know, again, he starts off as a 4 vitality, so you can do that twice, for example. So like, let's say you've got 1 wound on everyone, you just exert double on Gil-Galad, now you have 3 wounds on everyone, you probably just completely cleared the board. So just a absurd ability, so that it, in particular, that is a regroup action. So in particular, this is if you're looking to double or triple move, you just clean off the shadow side by using his regroup ability. And you'll see too, very much so, it synergizes with Aiglos, his artifact spear. It will very much so work well with that ability. And this is just a beautiful foil too. Love this card, love the character. So we have 3 of those. Not a full play set, but we have 3 of those in the deck. Then the other key elf companion we have here is Cirdan, the Shipwright. And so Cirdan says, again, to be able to get him down, you have to spot 2 elves. And then his effect, you know, he doesn't seem so great on his face, where it just says, exert him to make a minion he is skirmishing, strength -1 for each elven event in your discard pile. Again, this deck is going to just be dumping elven events into the discard pile with Galadriel. And so this can get very big. You know, it can get up into the 5, even, you know, by the end of the game, 10 range in your discard pile, so that he's basically just overwhelming minions, which is a crazy thing to think about. Is, you know, remember, the overwhelm rule works both ways. So he can be up against a minion with some hefty vitality, and if he actually is double their strength, he overwhelms them, and then they're just cleaned off the table. So that's something to remember and keep in mind when you're playing Cirdan. So we do have 2 of those. Again, just a great, beautiful card there too, getting ready to sail off into the west. And our last elf is Elrond, the Venerable Lord. Again, not as critical of a companion in this deck, but just another elf companion. And he can get some incidental healing by when he skirmishes, you reveal the top card. If it's an elf card, you get to heal another elf. So there's some incidental healing that can be had, and there's some tricks with stacking the top of the deck, not much, but that way, you know, just again, get some extra healing. And I think the thing to notice about that's very crazy with these elves is if you just look at their vitality is all 4 here. So I mean, and these aren't like Hobbit level strength characters. These are strong companions with 4 vitality. So statistically, elves are a very strong the next thing we have here then is our rounding out the rest of our companions, and that is Radagast the Brown. Again, just an absolute staple of the movie block, and you all know what this does. Likely makes the move limit +1, and when it does have the downside of when you move during the regroup phase, opponent may discard 2 to draw 2. So that's actually a drawback that he has, but he just has natively printed on his card, the move limit is +1. And again, the trick with Radagast always too is if you're only going to use him for one triple, you can put him down, get that ability, and then you can kill him off, and then you don't bear any of the downsides of having an extra companion in your fellowship, or having to let your opponent discard 2 to draw 2 and draw into some minions. So Radagast, just a great card to have 2 copies of that in the deck. And then lastly, we rounded out with Sam, son of Hamfast. Really serves, I'd say, I mean, he serves one purpose, which is removing burdens. But largely in this deck, that's 3 purposes. One is when you bid high, you can bid higher knowing that you have 2 Sams in there to reduce your burdens. So it helps you be more likely to go first. Secondarily, of course, we mentioned the Binding Ring, and the Binding Ring does have a, pretty hefty burden cost of adding 2 burdens to get those rings out of your deck, but that's not too hefty of a cost when Sam can just remove those right away. And then the other thing, of course, is if his Shadow strategy attempts to add burdens, Sam is a defensive card to not allow your opponent to add those burdens. So again, just an absolute staple of the movie block. Just, trading an exertion for a burden removal is just too good of a trade. So we do play 2 of those. Moving on then into our artifacts and weapons. The first one on deck we did talk about earlier. and that is Aiglos. I think I'm saying that right, but I don't know for sure, guys. So Aiglos, this is Gil-Galad's spear, and basically what it does is it adds 1 to his vitality, which again is great because he has that regroup exertion effect. And because it's an artifact, virtually impervious to shadow cards. A lot of shadow sides can discard possessions, but not artifacts. I think that Grond may be the only card that does that, the only played card at least, and that's, you'll see, we're pretty good at dealing with Sauron minions in this deck. So back to this card, basically it does give Gil-Galad strength +1 for each elven artifact you can spot, and I think we can get that up to like 4. And again, it's not each other artifact, it's each elven artifact, so that includes this, because this is elven and an artifact. So this automatically gives Gil-Galad +1 strength and +1 vitality. And then the effect, which is just fantastic, discard this effect to wound a minion for each elf you spot. So you're going to be spotting, 4 or 5 elves. And so because of that, you're going to wound essentially every minion on your opponent's side, most likely. So this is what I was mentioning with Gil-Galad's regroup ability. The tech there would be is you throw your Aiglos, do that first. That will wound a minion for each elf you spot. So then you can splatter 1 wound on each minion. And then come down with Gil-Galad once or twice and do the 2nd wound and the 3rd wound on every minion. And then again, it's literally just clear the table of minions. So that's a really great combo, well designed, that those 2 cards go together very well. But this is such a great card. You'll actually see people will play this card even in decks that don't have Gil-Galad, just to put it on Legolas Greenleaf, because any elf can bear it. So if it comes down to it, you certainly can put that on Greenleaf too. But I'd say in this deck, the intended user is Gil-Galad. Last thing to remember with this card is when it says discard this artifact to wound a minion for each elf you can spot. So technically, let's say my opponent has 1 big minion that has 4 vitality. Well, I don't have to wound 1 wound on that minion, 1 wound on another minion. I can actually take all 4 of my wounds and put all 4 straight onto that 1 single minion. So that is how kind of the effect of wound a minion for each elf you can spot. You can wound the same minion repeatedly. So it's not necessarily clearly worded in that way, but that is how the rule of how for each you can spot type wounding ability works. So Aiglos got 2 of those. Then the next, we get into our rings. First off, we have Nenya, the ring of Adamant. I don't know that word. Adamant. Not sure. Never realized what that was called or what that means. So Nenya, ROA. And we've got this is Galadriel's ring. So you put it on her, again, gives her an extra vitality. That doesn't really matter too much because we don't care really about her vitality. But what we do care about is this ability. Maneuver, heal 2 companions. So that's fantastic, especially if the companions you're picking are Legolas and Gil-Galad, or Legolas and Cirdan. But basically it, healing some of your best people. And then you can also place cards from your hand on top of your draw deck. So that's where, if you have that Elrond down, it can synergize with the Elrond, and you can get a 3rd guaranteed heal point off of Elrond by doing that. So we do run 2 of those. And again, guys, remember, this is a ring, so you can get it with the 1 ring binding ring. So always keep in mind, you can get 1, use it, replace it from the deck. So it's very nice, as long as you are comfortable with the burdens that you're able to take to do that, you can keep pulling rings from the deck. So we do have 2 copies of Nenya. Then we have Vilya. So Vilya is Elrond's ring, but again, actually this is, if you read it, Elrond or Gil-Galad. And again, because Gil-Galad's vitality is much more relevant in this deck, we're largely going to be looking to place this onto Gil-Galad. And again, the skirmish ability, you can get a pump off of it as a one-time use, but most likely we're putting this on Gil-Galad just to keep him keep him with higher vitality, because you start getting such high vitality too if you're not using his ability. You get him stacked up like this. You've got a 6 vitality guy. So even like Enkea and so forth, you're impervious to that just because your vitality is so high. Now again, he'll probably just go after a Greenleaf or something, but still, it's nice to know that your guy is extremely safe when you get him piled up like that, and you can more freely use his exert to wound ability. So that's Vilya. And then the last ring that we have is Narya. That's the Gandalf ring, but again, the bearer may be Cirdan or Gandalf. So this one, of course, is for Cirdan, and he has that exert ability as well. So the fact that we're putting, aside from Galadriel's ring is for healing, but for Gil-Galad and for Cirdan, we're putting rings on our guys to give them extra vitality, and then those guys actually have exert abilities. This one's ability is totally worthless in this deck because we're not playing culture tokens. Actually, I shouldn't say that, because you can remove shadow culture tokens if you needed to. So maybe Corsair or whatever, that's not widely seen too much in movie block, but you can use that defensively, like against a Corsair. But again, largely that's in there for the vitality boost on Cirdan. And whichever elf you get out, you can just pull their ring. That's what's so, again, not being a dead record with the binding ring, but the binding ring is so great because you can just pick whichever one you need. All right, so we are now moving on into our conditions. So we actually don't have any possessions in this deck. It's all artifacts, so that actually makes you too impervious to possession discard because you don't play possessions. Then getting into our conditions, beautiful card here, the Shadow Between. So this is really good for, again, 2 things. Really helps you cycle because it just lets you discard a card every single regroup phase. And also, of course, what you're going to be doing is heal an elf is really what you're trying to do here. So this, again, Legolas largely, or Gil-Galad, looking to keep those guys with fresh vitality by discarding a card from our hand. So that's just a very nice card in particular for this deck because all your key companions are elves, lets you cycle, lets you heal them. And remember, this is at the start of your regroup phase. So this applies, this isn't where, for example, you'd have to reconcile your hand or anything. If you do a triple move, for example, and you have 3 regroup phases, you can heal 3 times. So it's at the start of every regroup phase. So that is very nice in that regard. So we got 2 of those. Then we do have the Tale of Gil-Galad. Love the thematic nature of this as well. So again, probably looking to get this onto Legolas. He doesn't have any other vitality boosts, again, other than if we put an Aiglos on him. So just giving ourselves some extra vitality there. But again, it can go anywhere you want, any elf. And lastly, for conditions, we have 1 Hobbit condition, and that is Tale of the Great Ring. So again, for those of you who are not as familiar with movie, this card is just pretty busted because it's a 0-cost support area condition, and it just basically prevents your ring bearer from being overwhelmed, because the only way they can overwhelm you is if they play a shadow event, and not many of the shadow sides in this time frame are going to be playing skirmish events. So it pretty much gives you a free out for your ring bearer. Then moving on to the events. Now again, events in this deck are so good because they really have almost 3 purposes. One purpose is whatever the event itself says. The other purpose, of course, is the use with Galadriel, Lady Redeemed. And so that basically is like writing on to every single event that you have an ability that would say, let's just get it out here. Oh, Cirdan, get out of here. It's as if every single event you have also has the added ability of fellowship or regroup. Discard this event to discard a shadow condition or possession. So imagine just for 0, if every one of these events has an alternate cost of 0, discard this event to discard a condition or possession. And you do that in the Fellowship or the Regroup. That's just such a good ability. Like, you would play a card that said that, repeatedly if you had to, but this literally prints it onto every single card you have, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So we've got a dozen cards that all have that implicit ability on them. The first one here, probably your most critical event to actually play as an event to get your deck going, and that is draw a card for each elf companion you can spot. So for 3 Twilight, you draw 4 cards. Again, rule of 4, so even if you could spot 5 elf companions, you can't draw 5 cards. You're limited by that rule of 4. But it's a fantastic way to fill up your hand and get your Fellowship going early. So we do play a full play set of those. And then again, later on, if you don't need the card draw, you pitch it in discard conditions. Then next thing we have here is Forearmed. This is a fun card. Reveal the top card of your draw deck to make a minion skirmishing an elf -X, where X is the Twilight cost of the revealed card. I'd say probably like, the coolest thing, for example, that you could do with this. And what are we teamed up with? We're teamed up with a Ninja Gollum. So it's not as cool as if you have like, Sauron's the most ridiculous one, but if you have a big minion, you can basically stack that big minion on the top of your deck, and you can kind of get to the point where you're overwhelming people too. So if you did like Nenya's ability to stack cards on top of your draw deck, and you stack just your most expensive minion, then suddenly this can become a very high reduction to your opponent's minion. Here, though, I think, again, it's kind of just a random pump, but random pump / discard an event or possession, discard a condition or possession. So we do have 3 of those. That's a really cool card there with Aragorn getting the troops rallied at Helm's Deep. So have 3 of that. And then this is what I mentioned earlier about we have some strong hate against the Sauron minion culture. So we have exert an elf to discard a Sauron minion, condition, or possession. So again, dropping a minion for playing a maneuver phase event is just absurd, especially, they'll be playing like, Trolls of Gorgoroth or something that cost them, 10 Twilight, and then you just discard them. So that is pretty busted. So it's very situational, of course, very meta call against Sauron culture. But again, if you're not playing against the Sauron culture, this still says 0 cost, discard a condition or possession. So we do have 3 of that also. And again, it's cool that Elrond's on there. I like this deck. This is one of the most thematic decks in LOTR that, all your cards kind of have the same characters on it. Gil-Galad, Elrond. It's all elf themed very heavily. So that's what's cool too. And last but not least, we have, maybe actually this is least, but we have our Curse the Foul Feet. I'm not a huge fan of this card. Largely, again, this can help contain a minion swarm because you can, if they have a whole bunch of orcs in their hand, you can make them discard a card for each orc they've revealed. But again, I don't know how much of like Moria Swarm or whatever we're going to be seeing, but got a couple of this in here situationally. But again, these situational cards don't matter. You can play situational cards because you're pitching them for discarding conditions. Broken record on that, of course, but that's, again, you've got your Galadriel and you got your 12 events. And then the final thing that those events obviously go with, as I mentioned, is as throughout the game you start piling up these events either through natural use or through Galadriel, then you're just making your Cirdan better and better, and Cirdan will start overwhelming people at the end of the game. So that is our Free People's Side. Definitely one of the most synergistic, most thematic, most powerful. And again, a lot of that is to be said with Galadriel, but there are variants of this. If Galadriel is banned, it's pretty easy to slot Gandalf in there and have Gandalf do some of the heavy lifting with, getting rid of conditions and so forth. But yeah, it definitely is much synergistic and more powerful just to let your elf cards all work together to do that. So I am going to dive right into the shadow side. Like I said, sometimes I've been previously making different videos where we only review one side or the other, but with these movie block decks, I'm going to try to go through the entire deck for you guys. So the next part of this is the Ninja Gollum side. And this is very thematic for today. I don't know if you guys saw the recent news that they are making a new movie starring Gollum, and I thought maybe it was like an April Fool's thing when I saw it, but I'm like, no, that looks legit. So Hunt for Gollum is coming out in like 3 years. But, you know, it's going to be another Peter Jackson, Andy Serkis movie. So I was really excited. So what better time to show off a Ninja Gollum deck than on, you know, the coattails of that news. So, obviously, Ninja Gollum is the namesake. Well, I shouldn't say ninja. None of these cards are called ninja, but ninja just comes from the fact that you have a minion that looks very innocuous, but then when it uses all its tricks and tools and all the things that it has, it really turns into this, you know, stealth ninja that can take out anything. So, we start off by playing our Gollum the Mad Thing. This is the one where, you know, typically the Free People's player is not going to want to add a burden. So they're typically going to let you have an 8 strength Gollum. So that will really let you start winning some skirmishes, and then you'll start doing bad stuff to your opponent because you're winning those skirmishes. And then again, when the bad stuff is that you actually add burdens, whether they want to or not, then you shift over to Gollum the Stinker, because Gollum the Stinker then will get strength +1 for each burden. So you get you get up to 3 burdens on your opponent. Then he's natively just as powerful as this guy anyway. Then he just comes in as an 8, and he just keeps getting more and more powerful because each time he wins a skirmish, you add a burden. So this will be the go-to guy later on. This guy you usually lead off with and then switch over to here. Then we have Shelob, her ladyship. Again, just a fantastic card. 8/8 enduring. Don't forget about the enduring. This one is great, simply because for archery, you know, you throw it all on here, of course, and then it just keeps getting more and more powerful. And, you know, even if this loses skirmishes, again, it doesn't lose for long because it becomes a 10, then a 12, and it, you know, ends up getting pretty hard to kill. And with its vitality, the only way you can possibly kill this is with stuff that, you know, exhausts a minion and then wounds it to death, because you're never going to get 8 wounds. And that's quite frankly, obviously absurd with the 8 vitality. So its ability, though, aside from being enduring and fierce, is when you play Shelob, if you spot Gollum, you may spot a companion. That companion may not be assigned to a skirmish until the end of turn. So that applies to regular skirmishes and fierce skirmishes because it cannot be assigned until the end of turn. So that's key. And then, of course, you know, typically you're just looking to pick their best companion and just put him on the sidelines so that then Gollum is fighting their second best. And so that's really what Shelob is for. So we do have 3 Shelobs. Next, we have 2 Enkeyas. You guys all know what Enkeya is for. That's for crowd control. Make sure your opponent doesn't go up to 6 companions, and if they do, crucify their best one. So that is in there twice to make sure we have access to that ability. And then just for getting exertions on the people we need to get them on, we have 2 Desert Lord. So again, just a great card to wound up the people that you need to be wounded. Or I should say exert. He can't actually wound, but he can get the wounds on whomever you need to, so you can finish him off with other tactics. So that is actually all the minions that you play. So it's very light on minions, but you'll see that there is just tons and tons of recursion, especially for the Gollums and the Shelobs. You know, there's lots of ways to get these back over and over. And these guys, there's a couple ways to get back as well. So moving in then to our only possession in the deck is we do have 2 copies of the Web. And so this is Shelob's Web. And so what it says here is if there are fewer than 3 cards stacked here, you may spot your Golem minion to stack that minion here. Don't think I know we're not using the orc part of that for this deck, so it's really just a permanent reservoir for your Gollum or Shelob, because again, it's your Gollum symboled minion. So you just stack them there in the regroup phase, and then you can replay them as if from hand in the shadow phase. So it's a very good, back to tank for your, sorry, Star Wars reference there, but good place to hold your Shelob and Gollum and replay them again and again. So, and the nice thing with Shelob is when you take him off and stack him on the web, or her, I know Shelob's a girl, guys, don't hate on me for that. When you discard her and put her on the web, if your opponent then moves again and you replay Shelob, then you get to reuse the ability of when you play Shelob, sting the companion. So you get, the double sting in that way by voluntarily taking yourself off the table and putting yourself back down. So those webs are very nice for re-triggering that enter the battlefield ability. And I'm talking magic. Sorry, guys. So the when you play. Next, for our recursion package, we do have 3 copies of the Evil Smelling Fens. This is just a fantastic card because this is what allows you to get any minion back out of your discard pile. So this is going to be really critical in particular for Enkea to make sure that if your opponent keeps violating that game rule, that you just keep throwing him at them. And obviously also, it can be used for Shelob or Desert Lord too. But this is where you basically just exert Gollum twice and discard this condition to play any minion from your discard pile. So that fantastic recursion there. Then getting into our ninja tactics now. First and foremost, we have our promise keeping. This is such a expensive condition. So this is brutal where if you're going up against like a Galadriel and they're pitching these and making you discard this for 0 and you paid 4 for it and it's a unique card that you can't even have a second copy down at the same time. But point is it costs 4 and it's unique for a reason, and that is because it is so good. If you read it, it may not sound as good, but each time a companion takes a wound during a skirmish that involves a Golem minion, exert a companion. So this is, again, sounds maybe a little innocuous, but exert a companion means I, the shadow player, get to choose which companion I exert. And also this is each time a companion takes a wound during a skirmish. So that means if it's the regular skirmish, they take a wound. If it's a fierce skirmish, they take a wound. If I have another effect, like they stole it, that wounds a companion, that's taking a wound also. So literally, Gollum, they stole it, fierce, that could be 3 wounds. That's going to be 3 exertions on any companion I choose. So this just really lets you pepper exertions everywhere. It makes combat very difficult for your opponent because they have to carefully choose the order of skirmishes, because if I stack a bunch of exertions on a companion that's going to end up losing a skirmish and then they take that final skirmish wound and it kills them, then they're in the dead pile. So this just makes things so difficult for your opponent. So we do have 3 full copy, or 3 of that, not a full playset, but 3 of those. And that's, I think, a cool looking card. I think that's him throwing the Lembas bread over the edge. But it's cool because it looks like lightning and that he's throwing a rock or something. But that's the promise keeping. And last thing to note about that, again, this isn't Gollum. This is a Gollum minion. So Shelob almost always is going to win both of her skirmishes, excuse me. Keep misgendering Shelob here, guys. But basically, since she is also a Gollum minion, anytime this goes down, you're getting 2 wounds off of promise keeping, most likely, or 2 exertions off of promise keeping, excuse me, because it goes down for the regular and the fierce skirmish, and it is a Golem minion. So, fantastic card. The next thing that does synergize with it that I mentioned is They Stole It, and we have a full playset of that. So this card, if you're not familiar, this requires a lot of investment out of your hand, and that is to say, discard 3 cards from hand to wound a companion Gollum is skirmishing once or twice if it's a Hobbit. So the key thing here, of course, is if you can get a kill, always go for the kill. Discard those 3 cards. Even if you're discarding something that you feel is valuable, if you're getting a kill out of it, go for the kill. That's my general advice with this card. If you're just getting like what would be an exertion, you know, you probably don't want to discard a card that's going to be critical for you later, because Promise Keeping is going to give you all the exertions you need. You need to get that wound for the kill, though, and They Stole It will really give you the wound for the kill. So it makes it very difficult for your opponent to assign minions to Gollum, because technically even if you have 6 cards in your hand, you can get a double wound out of that even. Doesn't always happen that you have 6 available, but if you do, you can get your double wound. And then, you know, rely on playing stuff off a web or something like that, because your hand is probably diminished from that. But that is a, you know, fantastic necessary card to really get the final wound out. And if you are playing Hobbits, it's just like lights out for them, because you're placing so many wounds on those Hobbits by getting the double wound. But again, by and large, getting 1 wound is still just fantastic, and it can help you cycle. If you've got garbage cards in your hand that you don't want, of course, then always go for the exertion just to cycle your hand. So you have to use a little bit of judgment of, you know, are these 3 cards that I'm getting rid of something I want to get rid of, or is it going to punish me for doing that? So that is They Stole It. Then this is just an absolute necessary card that we've got 3 copies of, and this makes Gollum fierce. So that is why it's so critical. You need Gollum in as many skirmishes as possible so that you can repeatedly use They Stole It, so that you can repeatedly use Promise Keeping. And this just lets him get into 2 skirmishes a turn instead of just 1. Also has the incidental effect of spot 6 companions to play Gollum from your discard pile to exert a companion and place this condition back on top of your draw deck. You know, yeah, do that if you can, but mostly you're in here for being fierce. Then some singleton conditions. We have Fat One Wants It, and this just says each time Gollum is played, add a threat, or I should say Gollum or Smeagol. But usually Smeagol's in the starting fellowship, so you're not typically going to ever get anything added for Smeagol. But Gollum, you're going to be playing him over and over. So this will get threats added, because the key thing here is you're not doing anything really special with threats, but what you are doing is you're going to kill companions. And when you kill companions and then you rain down threat wounds on top of that, it just gets very ugly with there being, you know, nowhere to put those wounds, because you've been exerting people so aggressively with Desert Lord, with Promise Keeping, just general skirmish wounds from Shelob, you know. So this is fantastic to just keep the threat wounds going, and it's a very low investment, just one copy, 1 cost, unique condition. So again, you know, you look at playing against someone who, for example, doesn't have a Galadriel or doesn't have like a, you know, Gandalf to clear out all the conditions. If your opponent doesn't wipe the support area of all conditions, or, you know, just repeatedly Galadriel you, they're going to have a very hard time keeping up with Ninja Golem once he, you know, he keeps turning into more and more of a ninja as the conditions go down. Final Strike, we got 1 copy here. This is just exert to prevent archery or maneuver special abilities. I'm not sure exactly what the situations are where that's as critical, but again, we're just playing 1 copy of that card. And then this is great, again, just for making combat math difficult, because it's a 0 cost pump. You know, this is like the Saruman's Ambition or whatever of this deck, because it's just discard this condition to make a Golem minion, strength +1 for each culture you can spot. So, you know, you might get, you know, 2, 3, 4 pump off of that. But again, because it's 0 and just sits in your support area, your opponent has to respect that you have that ability to increase your power. And then the other thing, too, that can actually be huge, and, you know, sometimes you forget that this is there, but if you have initiative, each Golem minion is damage +1. So you don't have anything that gives you initiative or discards cards from your opponent's hand in this deck, but if your opponent does happen to play their hand a little too loosely and go down to 3 cards, then always remember to punish them with just the brutal damage. Because if each golem minion gets damage +1, it's just lights out for them. Between a fierce golem and a Shelob, they just cannot afford that many wounds. So make sure to keep an eye on their hand, because if they do get careless with it, you just will brutalize them. Then now we're getting into our final bit here of events, our Gollum recursion. Gotta love the full play set of Captured by the Ring. That's just a beautiful staple LOTR card. Probably the most expensive common foil as far as I know. And basically this will also keep your threat count up, because this says play Gollum from your draw deck or discard pile to add a threat. So not only do you get him out of deck or discard pile, you get to add a threat. And then Fat One Wants It is not like, sometimes this is worded as like Shadow, play Gollum to add a threat. That's not how this is worded. This is just worded as each time Gollum is played, add a threat. So you do actually, if you play Captured by the Ring with Fat One Wants It down already, you do get 2 threats. So you get a threat off of Captured and a threat off of Fat One Wants It. So this can really get a huge threat engine going. And last but not least, we must have it. Again, more Gollum recursion. This is really nice though too, because if you need to get a pump, this can double for yourself as a pump. Now the thing that I don't like about this, but it is just a necessary evil of the card, is that you have to discard a card at random to get the pump. So you might lose a card that you really critically need, or you might go down to less than 3 that you needed to discard a card off of They Stole It. But as long as you use this responsibly, again, to make yourself win skirmishes that you would not otherwise win, this deck just, again, thrives off winning skirmishes. So if you need to use these as a pump, absolutely do so. And that is the deck. Now, just to finish it off, guys, with the site path, we have the Rohirrim Road. This is what I like to call the Dauntless Hunter site. Exert an elf to make the twilight cost of each condition and possession +2 until the end of turn. Again, you can exert like a Galadriel or someone that you don't care about their vitality, because she'll never skirmish a person ever. And that will basically give you that Dauntless Hunter effect for 1 turn of making conditions and possessions cost +2. So this is huge when early on you just make your opponent, like if I'm playing against this deck, I got to pay 6 for a stupid promise keeping, and then I pay 6 to get that down, and you just discard it with a Galadriel for 0. It's very demoralizing to your opponent's early board development. So Rohirrim Road. Then the West Road. That, again, most of these just give Shadow random bonuses. This one says if Shadow has initiative, Shadow number +3. Hall of the Kings. So this is nice, again, if you need some card draw. Don't be shy to add threats to draw cards. So if you don't have one of your... I want to say Last Alliance, but the card that lets you draw the Alliance Reforged, the card that lets you draw for your elves. This is another way that you can get card draw, and this is good because this deck is really looking to do triple move 3 to 6 is big game for sure. So Hall of Kings. Anduin Banks, again, just remove a burden to make a minion strength +2. You don't generally want to remove burdens, but again, if there's a really critical way that you're winning a skirmish that you wouldn't otherwise win, you might do that. Pelennor Flat. This is the one that's here very brutal for burden adding, because it just says opponent must discard his entire hand or add 2 burdens. Most people do not want to discard their hand, so you end up getting 2 burdens off of this. And if you give Gollum extra burdens, Gollum's stinker just turns into a beast then, because he just feeds off those burdens. So this is very huge for that. Then Minas Tirith, the 7th circle, pretty obvious here. This is where if you move through it in the regroup phase, if you're playing catch-up, you get to heal all of your elves. The Osgiliath Channel, This is the one that says spot your minion and 6 companions to make the Free People's player move again this turn. So you can kind of force them into a double move is this one. But again, this is the kind of the spot 6 site and gives you various punishing effects for spotting 6. But again, if you got 6 companions down, we're just going to NKA you anyway and make you double move. It'll be curtains. Then this one, again, pretty obvious for this deck. It's cool that they actually made the site for Gollum. So this one is Shadow, remove 2 threats, and play Gollum from your discard pile to add 2 burdens. So that's huge for 2 reasons. One, it gives us a free recursion of Gollum. And number 2, it adds 2 burdens. You definitely, absolutely would trade 2 threats to add 2 burdens. So do that every time. And lastly, we have Daggerlad. This is kind of the most common site you'll see in King, in the King site path, the movie block. And this is when the Fellowship moves to this site, add 3 threats. So again, that just makes it so when you start killing companions, the threats start raining down. So that's the deck, guys. I appreciate your time with this. Oh, one thing to mention just about the deck size here, it is a full 35 card deck. So if you're looking to play this, let's say, like I do with my movie block gauntlet, you know, I look to try to cut it down to 35 so that I'm not, I cut it down from 35 to 33. So you'd have to trim a couple cards from each of these sides to do that, but just use your discretion, and usually it's something that you play 4 copies of, you go down to 3, or 3 copies, you go down to 2, whatever the case may be. So that is kind of what we would look to have you do with this deck. So just kind of showing off for our thumbnail here. I think we're just going to go with our staple companions and staple minions here to line that up. So just get a quick shot of that. See if I can get the lights adjusted for the foiling. You can see Galadriel there. Can't quite get Gollum though. So, well, close enough. Appreciate you guys sticking through me with this long video. Let me know if you like the long format. I'm happy to break these decks videos down into 2 sides, but I thought for these exact World Championship decks, it might be fun to run through the entire Free People's and Shadow side. I'll have to decide what we do when we're going to run into a lot of, in particular on the Free People's side, we're going to run into a lot of elves and men, and I don't want to make that video over and over for you guys, so we might be breaking stuff up anyway. But for some of the first few decks, we'll try to keep them fully intact so you can marvel in the beauty of the entire deck as a single piece. So thanks for watching, guys, and don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more videos.